all the different frequency bins, and then the score of how well each of those correlates. So if we run this, it's going to take a while to print it. Ta-da! Yeah, so basically these are all the different offsets between 0 and 12, all the different code phase offsets between 0 and 12,000. Remember that 12,000 comes from 1023 resampled to 12,000. And then all the different frequency bins for the Doppler shifts. And you can see when there's a satellite there hidden 15 dBs beneath the noise floor, you can really see it because you're getting this big correlation. So it's basically it's a 2D version, a 3D version of that thing we saw when we did the noise correlation earlier, where there's just a big spike in the middle. When you happen to align perfectly, we're both aligning. So that thing we plotted earlier was basically looking at it this way against the different scores, but we also have to search in the Doppler frequency space as well to find this thing. And then you see a big spike there when you get it, which is satisfying. So this table, from this 2D data structure, you can pick out the highest value, which is basically where the satellite is. And just, I can say, I happen to know satellite 22 is in this millisecond of data. If I was to do it with satellite 23, that can run and then replot it, you'll just see like a sea of noise and no particular correlation, probably, hopefully. There we go, yeah. So it takes a while to redraw. So you can see it's just nothing. So it's very obvious when you found the satellite in there and obvious when you haven't found the satellite in there. So that's kind of pleasing because we basically acquired a satellite. You have to do that for each of the 32 possible satellites you could see in the sky above you, so it can take a while. But so they do this circular correlation thing in hardware often on the actual GPS receivers, which is quite power efficient. So once you've... remember the whole point of this that we're trying to do is we're trying to be able to get the navigation data. Trying to get this navigation data, which we've encoded with these pseudo-random numbers, this one back out at the end of this process, because that's basically unfurling the paper airplane to see when it was sent, and we can work out how far it's come. So that's the purpose of this exercise. So once we've got an initial stab from that 2D graph of both the code phase and the frequency, that's a good start from which we can try and track that signal as it keeps coming in. So the job we're trying to do basically is we've got this incoming signal, which is again this BPSK modulated thing, but hidden enormously beneath the noise floor, so it's sort of completely swamped by noise. If we can mix it down with a perfect carrier phase replica, we can end up with the original pseudo-random bit stream modulated with the data, which was this one here. And then if we can then also multiply it by the pseudo-random number, we can have coming out of here the original 50 baud things that we're actually interested in. So that's basically the job of the tracking loop, is to extract this bit stream, 0, 1, 1, 0, whatever. That's the job of it, to extract that bit stream. And once you've got that, the rest is quite easy. It's just like passing NMEA or whatever. It has a structure of where the satellites are and things like that. So this is what we're going to try and do with the tracking loop. So there are two parts: tracking the carrier wave and tracking the pseudo-random number phase. How do you track the carrier wave? Well, there's a whole topic called phase lock loops, which are very useful things whereby you can try and make a local oscillator lock on to the frequency of an incoming oscillator, which is going to be the satellite signal, and stay with it. And if there becomes a slight phase offset between them, the phase lock loop should try and correct that to stay locked. That's what's called a phase lock loop. It should stay in perfect synchronicity with the thing we're trying to track. But the obvious problem with the phase lock loop is that it's very difficult for a phase lock loop to track a signal whose phase keeps suddenly changing 180 degrees, because that throws it off completely. And that's the case with binary phase shift keyed things. That it's not a continuous phase, it just keeps going bang and changing 180 degrees or pi. So a normal phase lock loop is no good for tracking binary phase shift key signals. But thankfully there is an adaptation of the phase lock loop called the UKHAS loop, which is this. So so we have an incoming signal. Again, it's this this thing with the phase shifts in it. hidden in the noise. Let's just hypothesize we can perfectly track the pseudo-random code to multiply it out. Then we can take a normal phase-up loop, and we can do our I and Q demodulation again, and we can make a thing called a carrier loop discriminator, which compares the signal coming from I and compares the signal coming from the Q, and tries to see which has more of the signal power in it. And then the output of the carrier loop discriminator will try and change the local oscillator's settings so that all of the signal power stays in the I, the in-phase branch. So let's say if a signal comes in and it suddenly changes phase, suddenly the Q power will go right back up because there's more power in Q than in I. And the carrier loop discriminator will say that and try and change the phase and the frequency of the local oscillator to push it back so that all the power is concentrated in this in-phase signal. And then in theory what would come out of here would be the navigation data bits. So a bit of maths now, unfortunately, but hopefully this is the only maths really. How would you actually make a carrier loop discriminator? Well, you will probably have forgotten from school that how to multiply sine and cosine waves together, but it's easy enough, I'll remind you. So what is coming in here is the data multiplied by a sine wave. So it basically modulated data. Sorry, that's what's coming out. Having got rid of the PRN code, it's just the nav bits modulated by a sine wave. And we can describe that mathematically as the navigation data d multiplied by a sine wave at some frequency, which I'm going to call omega. Omega's just a standard thing for frequency. And then and then what we're doing again is then multiplying this thing, which is the data multiplied by the sine wave from the satellite. We're multiplying that again by a local sine wave, which we're generating with the local oscillator here. And let's hypothesize that there's a slight phase error between the local oscillator and the GPS satellite's phase. So that's going to look like, again, multiplying it by a sine wave of the right frequency, but with a phase error, which we'll just call phi. So remember that you could just add a constant onto the end of the sine function just to change the phase of it around. And so if you multiply these together, a sine by sine is easy enough. So just from school, you'll have forgotten, like me, that sine A times sine B is equal to a half cos A minus B minus cos A plus. These are just completely standard trigonometric results. You can just look up on the internet when you need them, instead of trying to remember them. And sine A cos B is equal to a half sine A plus B plus sine A minus B. Oops. So the way you multiply these together, when you multiply these together using these results, you just get a half times the data rate times by cos of the phase minus a half times the data rate times by 2 times the frequency plus the phase. And then, so this is all for the I arm. Where's it gone? So this is what's coming out of here, is this one. And then in the Q arm, it's the same kind of story. It's d times by sine, so the data modulated by the satellite onto the RF frequency. And because the Q arm is the same as multiplying by cos instead of sine, because cos is just a sine wave shifted by 90 degrees. So that's sine times by cos omega with some phase shift. And again, using sine cos, using this result, you get that the answer is a half times by, so sine of the phase plus a half times the data times by 2 times the frequency plus the phase. So we have a component coming out of here that is just a function of the phase, and then another one is at 2 times the original frequency plus the phase. So what we can do is, because this is at 2 times the frequency, if we low pass filter what is coming out of here by just inserting a low pass filter to get rid of all the stuff that's at twice the frequency. That's not a low pass filter, is it? That's a low pass filter. Then you can just end up with that what's coming out of the I arm is a half d sine of the phase error, and what's coming out of the Q arm is a half d cos of the phase error, because we've got rid of these parts by low pass filtering. And then grab a new thing. We can say that the Q power over the I power is equal to a half d sine. Have I messed? Yeah, I've messed these up. Yeah, I wrote them backwards, didn't I? So that's cos, and that's sine. Beg your pardon. So sine of the phase error, and that's a half d cos of the phase error between these two. These bits just cancel, so we get sine of something over cos of something is the same as tan of something. So that's tan of the phase error. So therefore the phase error is equal to the inverse tan of Q over I. So basically we just do the inverse tan function like you do on your calculator of what's coming out of the Q arm versus what's coming out of the I arm. So that's our discriminator. That tells us the phase error between what's coming out of this one and this one, which is what we need to know in order to correct it so that there's no phase error between this one, and this one's 90 degrees out of phase, i.e. this one is correlating perfectly with the incoming signal, and this one is not correlating at all with the incoming signal. So that's that bit. But the picture is inevitably a bit more complicated because this all assumes that you know that the pseudo-random number code is completely aligned in order for this to work. But it's not, of course, because it drifts too. So you need some kind of way of correcting for the drift in the pseudo-random numbers code phase. We can do that too. So again, hypothetically, let's pretend that the local oscillator, i.e. our local replica of the carrier frequency, is completely aligned. So we're coming in with some signal from the receiver that's still modulated with the carrier wave and the data bits. And when we multiply by a perfectly aligned local oscillator, we'll just be left with the pseudo-random bit stream coming out. So let's assume that. What we can do is, we don't know how perfectly aligned we are with our local replica of the pseudo-random bit stream and the one coming from the satellite. So we can actually do something where we can generate 3 copies of the pseudo-random bit stream locally, all of which are slightly aligned differently. So you generate one that's half a chip early and the other one that's half a chip late. And you can see, and another one that's in the middle that's precisely on time, and you can see which of those has the best correlation score. And from that you can see whether your local copy is early or late. So that looks like that looks a bit like that. So let's say these are our locally generated copies of, this is just a sort of top hat approximation of the pseudo-random bit stream. These are our locally generated copies. Let's say this is the one that actually comes in. We can see it has the best correlation score with the late copy of the bit stream here, and not such a good one, a correlation score of a half with the prompt one, and a correlation score of 0 with the early one. So we can see that the late correlation score is much higher than the early correlation score, so late minus early is equal to 1 in this case. And in another hypothetical example, it's perfectly aligned with the prompt one, so we can see that it's symmetric, the correlation score is symmetric about the prompt one, so late minus early is 0. So you can tell whether you're early or late, basically, just as a function of the late minus the early ones. And then, given what the number that comes out of that, be it positive or negative, you can shift your copy of the local one to stay on track with that one. Now, you probably will have noticed that I'm assuming here you have a perfectly, you need a perfectly good local oscillator in order to get this bit to work. And for the carrier phase tracking, you need a perfectly good PRN code in order to get the local oscillator tracking to work. So somehow we have to sort of magically combine these two separate parts to make anything work at all in this thing. So we can do that, and this might look a bit scary, but I promise it's not. It's just the two separate bits that we just did combined, right? So we've basically got the incoming signal, and we've got, as this broadly follows the structure of the Costas loop, except we've replaced these filtering bits here with our early, late, and prompt pseudo-random code tracking bits, like that. So again, you multiply the signal down by O and Q, and then you do this early, late, and prompting, which has the effect of filtering out the high frequency components that you don't want anyway as a side effect. And so the code discriminator works on the inner loop to keep the pseudo-random numbers tracking, and the carrier frequency looks at the output of the prompt of the I and the prompt of the Q in order to keep the. So this is the thing that's doing the tan of Q over I, the inverse tan of Q over I. Is happening in this one, and this is the one that's doing the sort of the late minus the early discrimination in order to. So these basically just output numbers that allow the tracking loops to correct both the carrier phase and the pseudo-random number phase. So what we're working on here is chunks of a millisecond long at a time now. So that's what's coming. They're basically passing list of samples are a millisecond long, a millisecond of recorded data at a time to work in this loop. The code discriminator late minus early, in order to work with this slightly more complicated double branch system, just looks like this, but it is just early minus late, but involving both the I and the Q branches, and then it's normalized by this thing on the bottom. So it's not as scary as it looks. It's basically still doing late minus early or early minus late, depending on the sign. And this is still just doing the tan discrimination like that. So in theory, as a reminder, the Costas loop is trying to push all of the energy into the in-phase branch when there's bit shifts. And this thing with the early late prompt, which is called the delay locked loop, is trying to push all of the energy into the prompt branch. So the in-phase prompt branch should, in theory, be the navigation data coming out that we want, in theory. And so that's the combined. This is the combined thing, the theoretical model that we were hunting for earlier. I've lost my slide. It's gone. Oh, is that the one that I threw on the floor? Yeah. Yeah. So this is the actual realization of this, which is just doing so, making a local perfect replica of the carrier wave, a perfect replica of the code, in order to turn the incoming signal back into the navigation data. In other words, it's doing precisely the opposite of what the satellite does when it turns. So we're basically making the GPS receiver is basically a backward satellite, in that we're turning back to front. The GPS satellite turns the navigation data into this, and we're trying to turn this back into the navigation data. So that's what this is doing. So this is what we'll now try and code up. And hopefully, if we code this correctly, then we should get at the end, from our a second of data, we should get some navigation bits coming out. And if we've done that, then we've solved the hard problem of GPS. Because once you've done that, it's sort of just a stream of bits. And you can look up on that data sheet from the US government what each of the bits means, which bits mean the satellite orbit elements, blah, blah, blah. It's all just a boring job of, coding after that.